one thing you need to understand here as well is that different journals work differently. So when it comes to different databases, so like Scopus, for example, here, not any journal is indexed into Scopus. So curated databases like Scopus or Web of Science, they apply stringent quality criteria in order for a journal to be listed within that database. And thus an article published in that journal would appear in that database. So one point here is that if I'm choosing a journal that's not indexed into Scopus database, for example, then Scopus will never know about it. Ranking agencies will never know about it. And a lot of people who are using Scopus for literature discovery will not be able to find out about your article. And similarly goes for other databases like Web of Science, for example. On the other hand, as well, there are other non-curated databases or search engines like Google Scholar, for example. And it's a different ball game here because they are not gatekeeping which journals get listed, but rather relying on the journal's capacity for search engine optimization. If a journal is has a very strong website that appeals to search engines like Google Scholar or Google, then your paper has a higher chance of coming higher up the order of search results if that journal has been optimized for search engine optimization. It's very important here. So this is a very tricky part that revolves around choosing properly the best journal for your paper. There has been multiple rounds of workshops on selecting journals for publishing, some of which you can find at the Africa Researcher Success portal. There are many recorded sessions already on the topic and how to optimize your choice of a journal. Nowadays, there is currently about 28,000 journals indexed into Scopus, about 152,000 conference events, and in addition to books as well being indexed onto Scopus. These are spread among physical sciences and engineering, health sciences, social sciences and humanities, and finally, life sciences. So there's plenty of options when it comes to Scopus indexation, for example. Which one should I target within those journals is a topic for a session in its own right. And again, if you check the Africa Researcher Success portal on Elsevier, I believe you can be able to find the recorded sessions for this one. So when it comes to ensuring your research article visibility, there are three aspects to consider here. Today, we are going to be focusing on the first aspect of which is preparing your article for visibility. And by visibility, that means that I want my article to be visible for both human readers as well as machine readers or let's put it in other words, the internet. How do I make my article visible for the internet as well? For our upcoming session, we will be discussing promoting your research in terms of sharing your article that has already been published, how to further enhance the visibility of an already published article, and we're going to be touching base also on sharing data. So let's start with preparing your article for visibility for human readers. And let me just, as a bit of a disclaimer at this point here, you might find that there are I would say some little nuisances or little contradictions between optimizing your article for a human reader or optimizing it for a machine reader, as we will go through that. But let's make sure that this is very clear. My article is primarily and the whole sole purpose of writing my research article and going through all that headache of getting my article published is that I want other humans to actually read my article. So let me be very clear that optimizing your research article for human readers should always take the top precedence here. So how do you maximize your article's visibility? So there are some few tips and tricks here that we are going to be discussing. So The best way you can go through that journey of preparing your article for visibility is to be very insightful to how you, as a reader, select your articles while you are conducting your literature discovery or literature review, or even just reading some articles in order to be catching up or for a bit of leisure, if you may. And the very first thing that always catches your eyes are attractive titles. So we usually skim through search results. If there are hundreds, thousands, or millions, you always skim the attractive title first. So a title is your first bid to win over a reader. If you are successful, then that reader will proceed to actually click on that article and start checking it out. In some other cases, they could expand and see the abstract while they are in the search page. This is such is the case with many publisher platforms and indexation databases. So it's very important that the very summary for that article becomes very attractive, whether they are what's called the highlights or the abstract. And then if we are going through that journey of somebody reading an article, then usually after you click on an article, you check quickly if there is a highlight or abstract that's telling you what the article is about. And usually what people do next is that they usually scroll through an article. And while you are scrolling through an article, your eyes will always be catching those visualizations and figures that are available in your paper. Everyone likes to look at pictures. For us scientists, we like to look at data points. So if I understand what the paper is talking about, I would probably skim through the results section to look at some of the visualizations there to see how far did they get with the research work results. Very important part here also as well is that when I'm setting the structure for my paper, usually somebody at this point clicked on the title for my paper. They have gone through the summary of the paper, whether it's in the highlight or the abstract. They have gone through they have gone through some of the figures and what happens afterwards. So again, there are hundreds of thousands of papers getting published every actually there are more than, yes, almost hundreds of thousands now getting published every month globally. And the question here is, nobody has time to read everything to the detail for every single paper that you are coming across. So what people do is that they skim through an article. And again, at this point, I want to finalize their commitment into reading my paper. One of the very important things for somebody who's skimming through a paper, one of the very important things is that there are how structured the paper is, how easy is it to go while I'm scrolling through the paper to find the various sections. There are different reading techniques when it comes to reading a paper. Some people read the paper in a waterfall, like they read, if they decide, okay, this is a paper I'm reading, I'm gonna read the introduction, I'm gonna read the methodology, I'm gonna go through each section. Some people still like to, maybe if they are very versed in the topic, just skim through the introduction because they are probably very familiar if they're reading a lot into that topic, and then they would start reading carefully, starting with the methodology. If it's something too standard, then again, they will go into skimming mode, but usually parts about results, analysis, and discussion. This is very, very crucial because that's the solid core of your message that you are sending there. Okay, I'm not going to go through machine readers at this point, but it mainly revolves around search engine optimizations, keywords, captions, metadata, and linking. So let's get through these together. Let's start from this list here, from the bottom up. A strong content. What story do I have to tell the entire universe? Do I have something solid to share, or am I just publishing because there is a deadline for my 10-year committee and I just need to come up with something? Is my something worthy of publication or not? So there are usually 4 questions to ask. Have you done something new? Is there anything challenging in your work? And by challenging, we mean particularly challenging, something uniquely challenging to what you've been doing. Is the work related to a topic of high interest? And there's always that question, so that, you know, whenever an editor is making a decision, they are making a decision in support of the best interest of the reader. So nobody's interested in publishing something that readers wouldn't want to read about. And the last point is, have you provided solutions to some of the difficult problems that you have presented? If you can answer yes to some or all of these questions, then you have some things, you have a story to share. Different papers vary in the amount of novelty, if one might say, that is presented in a paper. Some papers present huge leaps or major breakthroughs in a specific area, but not every paper is meant to be a paradigm shift or a major breakthrough. Again, science is very sedimentary in nature. Everybody throws in a little bit of increment in pushing the science frontiers forwards. So again, if you can answer yes to only some of these questions, then you have something to share as well. So it's very important to, this is what people are doing when they are skim reading papers. So let's take a quick example here. So this is one of Elsevier's journals that's very multidisciplinary in nature anyway. And here there are, as you can see, if I'm checking articles, there are what's called review articles, and there is what's called research articles here. What is the difference? So very quickly on, a research article is about a researcher or a group of researchers who are sharing new results for a study that they have conducted themselves. There is some sort of study that was done, whether it's experimental, field work, numerical analysis, qualitative research, whichever methodology of research was conducted there. And there are some results, and that's what they are writing the paper to share. That's a research article. For a review article, things are quite different, because usually review articles are written by researchers who are very well versed in their field. And these review articles, they are not discussing a study that was conducted by the authors. It's rather that the authors are very well versed and very experienced in the field, that the editor usually commissioned them, asked them to write a review, a summary of what's going on in the specific field, what are the different changes, what are the newest trends, how do the different approaches of different researchers compare together. So the added value here is not new studies or new results. The added value here is that this expert is providing their own insight into organizing the field. So many review articles have established like taxonomies in a specific field. They will combine different papers done by researchers in a specific approach, and they will label them. This is the method, and they would coin a term for it or write in a new term. So like, let's check here one of these review articles here. So that's a review article. So again, that's a review article. As you can see, there's not much of a structure being put here. So it's an introduction for a topic. There is literature review, and very important part of the added value here is how that literature review is being organized into subsections, concept of emotional intelligence here, rule of in translation performance, and so forth. So there's not a specific structure here, and it would depend on how well versed the author of a review paper is able to organize a topic and introduce what work has been done by everyone working on that topic. For a research paper, things are quite different because, again, this is your work. These are your results that you want to share with people. So let's say, for example, let's pick management. So this is a pretty multidisciplinary journal. So you can see different fields here. Again, this here has a very standard kind of structure when it comes to research articles. So you are doing an introduction, and then you are describing how did you do your experiment, materials, methods, or methodology section. Then you are showcasing your results, telling us what they mean, and then discussing those results, and then you are summarizing what you have achieved so far and what's yet to be achieved by others working in the field in the conclusion here. So again, the same experience that you're having while you are reading an article, expect it in reverse when you are preparing that article for visibility. So the first thing here is this title here, it needs to be attention grabbing, otherwise I wouldn't click on that article. There is the abstract here. This is what's called a structured abstract. I'll get to that in a minute. And then there is this various sections here. So as I'm going through the paper, I still have not decided to commit to reading that paper. I could look into the abstract because it summarizes every section in that paper. And usually I want to know, okay, what did you want to do? Yes, this is what you wanted to do. This is how you did it. And this is telling me quickly what kind of results did you achieve. So as I go through, okay, should I read this? Should I not read this? You will scroll through the paper and your eye will naturally fall upon or pause at the different pages that the different images that you see here. If they have been well prepared, if they are telling a good story, then you probably will get hooked to read more about that paper here. So back to what we were just mentioning. The general structure for a research paper is title, abstract, keywords, introduction, methods, results, and analysis and discussion, conclusion, and then there is there are additional sections like acknowledgements, references, supporting materials, and similar. For a research paper, there is not really a standard structure for that paper. Some systematic review papers have different frameworks, like Prisma, for example. Anyway, here again, you have the introduction again, but you're free to organize how you are narrating the story of the research being done in that field as you would want it. There is the and then the conclusion, acknowledgement, reference. Paper if it's a research paper, because this study is there a break in my
Yes, Khaled, it was a slight break, but you're back now.
Okay. So I'm writing this entire paper because I went into my lab or my study or whatever. I did something, I came up with new results. This is why I'm writing this entire thing. Okay. For the review paper, because I'm building a narrative for that for the updates that are happening in a specific field. So these parts in red here represents the solid core content of your paper here. Every other thing that is in black here is there to support delivering this message here. This is what you want to send out to your readers. If everything you're writing in black is not supporting that part in red, then it's probably not written in an optimal manner. So The first piece of advice here is that if you are deciding to send a message for everyone, work on that message before you work on how you are wrapping that message for now. So we usually recommend that you start working on those parts in red before you start embarking on writing any other section in the paper. Even if you've written something, you can update it later on accordingly, but everything in the paper has to be optimized for the delivery of those parts that you see on the screen in red: methods, results, analysis, and discussion in a research paper, and in a review paper, that's the body or the main text, however you are structuring your narrative. So the first thing here is effective titles. Effective titles, when you are structuring your, when you are writing your paper, effective titles, they are built to attract readers' attention, contain fewest possible words, adequately describe content, are informative but concise, and identify the main issue. Let me ask you here on chat, based on your own experience, what do you felt was a trick that many authors did that you found that it was very appealing and you would want to use yourself? So like, what kind of technique did you find in some of the papers you're reading and you think it's a very interesting technique? Anyone on chat? I'm still waiting for your input. Nobody saw any ideas?
We've got one from Leslie, who is a librarian, one of our very good clients. And the answer is definitely title and then diagrammatic visuals. A picture says so much. Then from Palesa, picking up the most important part of the result to be in a title.
Interesting. Use words that are trending. For instance, COVID during the time of COVID. Picking up the most important part of the result to be in a title. Interesting. So let me tell you a bit of something that you've already seen everywhere. Like if you are using social media today, Twitter, Facebook, it's now called X, to no longer Twitter. Anyway, so there is that part where you see somebody who's written an article. Remember again, journals are written according to both journalistic and scientific standards. So things you see, some things you see in journalism, you could see reflected into scientific journals. Anyway, one of the plagues that we have today is that you are scrolling through your social media, you find a very interesting article with a very grandiose kind of title. When you click on that title and you read the article, it's not really measuring up to the title that it had. And we usually call these clickbaits in social media. It's something that's designed to trick you into reading an article when it's not really there. So this has been used on social media with some of the less reputable news outlets in science. That's a definite no. One of the very important things here is that, first of all, people are scanning through tons of titles at a time within a search results page. You want to attract their attention, so you don't want the title that goes on for like 2 complete lines. Okay, usually people will not stop at a long title. That's for point A. And point B, nobody would, this is science. This is not something we're doing for social media. So we don't use clickbaits. The titles has to be honestly reflecting the content within the paper. So, and identifying the main issue that you will be working on. There are different approaches to doing that. So let's go on a journey again. While you are writing your paper for visibility, it's always useful to go through your journey as a reader to remind yourself of what you had to go through yourself for that. So that's me on Scopus here, for example, or any search engine for that matter. I just want to remember my journey here while I was working on it. So let's say I am working in the field of, let's pick something, let's say solar energy, for example. And one of the very important things, as mentioned, is using words that are trending. There are multiple ways to do this. If you have access to SciVal, then there is an entire module for identifying trending words. If you have access to Scopus, then you can do this by checking the keywords section and how often different keywords are being used. So you can see here, for example, that photovoltaic is a trending keyword. One example I always like to mention when it comes to that is that, let's say, for example, that I wrote a paper about greenhouse gases emissions from a certain manufacturing process into the atmosphere, okay? If I was writing that research article in the early 2000s, the very trending word back then was air pollution. That was something that people were very accustomed to using as a keyword in the early 2000s and the 1990s. Now, if I'm doing the same science, the same research article, and I'm publishing it in 2023, I would probably use keywords like climate change or global warming. It's the same science. It's representing the same topics, but in 2023, people are more likely to look up climate change than they are more likely to look up a word like air pollution. So again, doing an analysis of seeing within, let's say, for example, here, I would put 2020 to 2025, for example. And yes, sometimes papers have been published scheduled for publishing already in 2024, so that can happen. And I could start to look at the keywords that people, what kind of vocabulary people are using nowadays when it comes to these kind of topics. And also not just the vocabulary, what kind of specific fields people are working on. So that could be useful. If I want to sort papers here by how the top cited papers, and let's start looking together at what kind of things people used when they are writing. Let's look at the titles of the papers that were top cited in the year the top cited papers that were published between 2020 and 2023. So this one here, S-scheme heterojunction photocatalyst. It's a very succinct, and it's actually the top cited paper related to solar energy here. Again, because it shows a journal that's very specialized in chemistry. It's Chem, and one of the very top journals in chemistry. Anyway, so again, I don't need to bother to make that title very easy to understand for people outside chemistry or solar energy. Again, optimizing your article for each journal is a very important skill here. So here, second example here is for advanced materials. So the readers for this journal are usually people who are into material science, not necessarily that they know about renewable energy, but they definitely know about material science. It's a review paper, again, photocatalytic and petrochemical systems, similarities and differences. One of the things that you do when your title is longer is to use a title and a subtitle here, or a heading and a subheading. And they are usually separated together by a colon, as you see here. Other fields have developed different approaches here. So for example, if you are working in biology, one of the things you would expect is that people use one single sentence that looks like, so let's say ACE2 receptor, for example, and I'm using a different keyword here. So these are different titles here. So now you can see again, so this is a compound noun, so there is no verb here in this title. This has two sections, COVID-19 and older adults, 2 dots, what we know. And here is one of the things that become very popular in biology and is actually expanding now to other topics. Here is a full sentence style. So here, structural and molecular modeling studies reveal, so there is a verb here, a new mechanism of action of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine against SARS-CoV-2 infection here. So this is a kind of an assertive title. This is usually a sentence that you find at the end of an abstract or at the conclusion section. So this is a title that is a statement highlighting the top result that, or the top conclusion coming out of this paper. This has become very interesting here. Sometimes people try to add a little bit of a less, a more friendly tone to their title. So here, for example, here, somebody coined an expression, the double hit hypothesis. So it's actually trying to coin a term that could be a little bit, let's say, there's no other way to beat around the bush. Some people want to add a cool element, like they want to make their title cool. Okay, so I've seen cases where people try to coin terms that seem colloquial, like double hit here. There are some people who've used quotes, to be or not to be. That has been overused to the point it's become a cliche, to something or not to something. People have done that, but by the end of the day, if you are scrolling through pages and pages of search results, your reader is looking for something that your eye can scan very fast, so it's very succinct, or something that looks different. So this one starts with bee venom, and there is a long dash, and then there is something. So I'm not an expert. Actually, I'm not a biologist. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. But again, as I was going through, these kind of things stopped. Like when I was scanning, I stopped there. Okay. It's a very useful exercise for you to start looking up topics that are not in your field and see what kind of titles made you stop while you are scrolling. Let's go back here. So next part here is the abstract. And let me tell you that the abstract is the craftiest part to write in a paper. The abstract is an entire summary of your paper. So every section in your paper has to be represented in the abstract. In the abstract, you're mentioning a little bit of the background on the topic and your aims and motivation. This comes from the introduction. A little bit about your method, what kind of method did you use or methodology did you use in one sentence. Then there is one sentence about the most important result that you've achieved and what does it mean, which comes in from your conclusion. So it's one paragraph that's 150 words or 250 words usually. So it's a very short paragraph where you summarize your entire paper, and your abstract, even this is called an unstructured abstract, which is a bit of a trick because an unstructured abstract is just a paragraph. But anybody who's been reading tons of papers knows that a well-written abstract is a paragraph, but it goes into that same order. The sentences are always arranged like purpose, motivation, approach and methodology, finding conclusions, and what's the value of your paper after all. An abstract is like an elevator pitch. Imagine that you have 2 minutes to get an editor to like your paper, to make a good first impression. Generally, a good practice for editors not to accept or reject a paper just based on the abstract. A good practice for editors is to read the entire paper before they decide to disk reject it or not. That being said, when it comes here to that, there is a bias that can happen, sadly, but it will be based on the first impression that you've made with your abstract. When your paper goes out for a reviewer in order to be reviewed, again, they would be sent the abstract before deciding to commit to reviewing the entire paper. And finally, this is what happens with your reader. They read the abstract. As you've seen in the example earlier, some journals are shifting to using structured abstracts where these are actual sections. Each one you fill with a sentence or two in a form like abstract. To summarize here, when you are writing a paper, remember one thing. Why are you writing a paper? Because you've done some interesting study and you want to share it with everyone everywhere. So let me ask you this question here, and you've probably heard it in some other of Elsevier workshops. What is the very first section you should write into a paper? So I just finished my experiment. I have results. What's the first thing I should do? Like should I open Microsoft Word or other word processor, LaTeX or whatever, and start writing? Actually, there is a tip that we have for you. It's a tricky question because the first thing you write in a paper is not on your Microsoft Word or other word processor that you're using. The first thing you should do here is actually work on the figures and tables of your data. Open your spreadsheets, your Excel, your visualization software, your Matplot, your MATLAB, your SPSS, whatever sort of thing that you're using for visualizations. So the very first thing is summarize and visualize your data before starting to write your paper. If you have a clear vision of what kind of data you have there, then remember that the entire paper is there to tell the story of those results that you've achieved. So first of all, have your data that you want to present in a presentable format before you start writing your paper. Then tell us the story of those data. So tell us, what did you do? That's the methods section. And then tell us what's in those figures. So describe those figures that you have prepared. That's the results section. And finally, tell us, what do these results mean? Remember when I had this slide earlier about the part in red about the core part of your paper? This is why you are writing your paper. This is what you want to tell people. Okay, if you have that ready, because I've seen this one too many times, people start writing the introduction first, and because they've read tons and tons of papers, the introduction becomes very long and very scattered, very out of focus, and it's not leading anybody anywhere. Again, you're not there to write an essay. It's not there about showing your writing skills or how well you've read different papers. That's not what's happening in a research paper. That could be the case when you're writing a dissertation or a review paper. But here, it's all about what you have achieved yourself. And then write your conclusion. Tell us, what is the take-home message from all your work? What future work should be done? How does this work? How can we expand on the work that you've written? And finally, write the introduction. And the introduction, let me tell you that the introduction is very journal specific. The introduction has to be tailored for each journal that you are writing to and for each paper. So definitely, you know that you cannot reuse introductions because that's or like recycle introductions because that's self-plagiarism. But apart from that, if I submitted my paper to a journal and it got rejected and then I wanted to submit it to another journal, it's very, very important at this point to know that I probably should look into modifying that journal, that introduction specifically. In addition to looking at modifying the paper beyond that, but definitely the introduction, I'd have to look at it first. Remember when we were looking at titles in Scopus and we saw that there was a title that had a lot of like specialized terms from chemistry, and I told you because that journal is specialized in chemistry, so all its readers are supposed to be well versed in a chemistry field. Whereas if you are submitting this paper to a material science, then you expect your readers to be more familiar with material science, less familiar with the renewable energy part. So the very first part of the introduction that makes it interesting is how to bridge the gap between the average reader of your journal, what they know, and what they need to know in order to understand your paper. Of course, there is another part where you are establishing the brand or the marketing positioning for your paper. You're describing what everybody else has done so far and where is the gap that your work comes in to fill. Is it continuing other people's work? Is it selecting an entirely new approach that you hypothesize will be better than other people's work as well? So again, that kind of introduction, it would be very sensitive to the journal. And let me tell you that finally you have given your gift to the world. It's time to wrap it in the title, abstract, and keywords. So when you are writing your paper, build it from the bottom up. Figures, tables, your data, methods, results, discussion, then conclusion, then introduction, then title, abstract, and keywords. This is the recommended order. At Elsevier, we strongly recommend you follow this. Of course, you could be very familiar with another approach, and if it works well for you, it works well. But we have seen that this actually results in a better quality for your paper in terms of how clear its communication gets. One of the things that have been added to many Science Direct journals is what's called the highlights. So what is the highlights section? So let's check one of the journals. And let's, yeah. Let's check this paper here. So this here is an example for a paper that just goes into the abstract. It's an unstructured abstract, but you can see the same structure going on here. Okay. Some journals of Elsevier decided to take this up a notch. And in order to further enhance the human readability for an article is to use what's called nowadays the highlights. So let's have a look at this. Is my screen shifting? I believe it might have frozen. Just a second. Apologies. So that's another journal here that you can see. Here has what's called the highlight section. So the highlight section is not part of the peer review process. You are invited as an author to write 3 to 5 statements as a more distilled form to highlight what's important about your paper. So if somebody doesn't have the time, can spare you 20 seconds, you would need to put in the most important parts of your work here in the highlight section. This is not part of the peer review process. This is post peer review. So this is the elevator pitch of your article, 3 to 5 for self-press journal. It can be only up to 4, and you cannot exceed 85 characters for each highlight. So don't try to capture everything. Don't try to just capture the very novel part of your research or the novel part of your methods, and use simple words here. Okay. Try to use things that are either very well known in the field. So here, unless MPSH is very famous in physics, I wouldn't recommend that. But if it's something that people can type in their search box, then it's definitely a good idea. Okay, it's not part of the editorial consideration, only for full research articles. They are provided usually as a Word document, and it's strongly advised not to use jargon, acronyms, or abbreviation, to aim for general audience and use keywords. We will come to that in our next session about how to communicate your science to a wider audience beyond academia, and consider the reader's highlights as the first thing they'll see. Okay, so these are different examples for highlights that you can find in the slides here. For visualizations in media, preparation of figures and graphics is very important. So many journals now mandate graphical abstract. If it's optional, I strongly advise you seize the opportunity. So a graphical abstract is one image that summarizes your entire article, what you're trying to work on. Again, now there are even journals that allow video submissions like a recording, narration, or animation. Some journals even have option to add a video abstract or an audio slide. The more media you can prepare for your paper, the stronger the paper will get in its impact. So for self-press journals, you can actually go and check some of the author narrated figures that they have prepared for your papers on self-press Figure 360 or Go Figure. Something that's very important is that when you are writing your paper, try to remember that to keep the spelling correct when you are writing your paper. This is very important for indexation platforms, to put in your affiliation information correctly. And third, which is very important, to use your ORCID ID so that indexation platforms can correctly attribute your paper to your own profile on these media. Okay, let's go over machine readers quickly for now, and we can continue while we are talking about promoting your research for the upcoming session as well. So for machine readers, it all boils down to this. Somebody is going to a search box to write few keywords, to click search, and I want my paper to be prioritized by that search function of an indexation platform or a search engine, okay? So what happens is that there has been always many changes in how search engine optimization works for different search engines. So people who are specialized in building websites, they usually have to update their knowledge all the time. But at this point here, I want to make sure that we know the basics as authors. The first thing is titles. So they usually, when you are writing keywords in the search box, a search engine would look up these words in specific areas of influence. So if they find the search term in one of the heavily weighted parts of a paper, like the title or subtitle. So let's say I'm looking up the word cancer, and I have two papers. One where cancer was mentioned in the title, and one when cancer was not mentioned in the title. Any search engine would probably prioritize the article that has cancer or the keyword I'm looking for in the title. There's also looking into the keyword section, the abstract, the metadata, the image and video descriptions. So how does this work? Very quickly here. In order to improve your search engine optimization game, you need to understand what are the trending keywords in a specific topic. Again, remember that you can do that kind of analysis on Scopus or Scival. And you can, if you know what kind of, like, should I use global warming or should I use climate change or air pollution? Which one should I use? And one of the things here that are very important is that you want to, your strategy to mix two things. You want to cover the various potential keywords that authors would look for. And again, many search engines and many indexation platforms have libraries or have dictionaries for establishing equivalences, okay? So for those of you who are working with health or biomedical research, PubMed, for example, has a taxonomy that establishes correlation between different terms, like called mesh. And there are similar taxonomies, M3 and Compendix in Elsevier. Anyway, What you need to do is that in order to prioritize your article, you need to increase the keyword density. So it's not a matter, search engines are not impressed by using vast vocabulary, rather than they're looking at how often that keyword was mentioned, especially in the very important sections of your paper. So if a keyword is mentioned in the title, in the abstract, in the keyword section, in the highlights, heading and subheadings, the very important, the caption part of the images, so the captions, the tables, and the metadata itself. Anything that you can add a caption to, add a caption, because they get a special weight when search engines are looking into your paper. And one thing that's very important, the more links in and out of your paper, the better. So that's very important part here. Many of the search engine optimization techniques will be conducted by your publisher. So if it's Science Direct, how a page on Science Direct is built with the latest strategies and techniques in search engine optimization born into mind. However, as an author, also having this kind of insight is very useful for me as well. Very important point to add here, linking, how many links go into an article and out of an article are very important in some of the ranking algorithms for some of the search tools. So if your article is being shared after it has been published in many different venues, so there is traffic coming from different places into your article, search engines are more likely to capture that and prioritize your article a bit more. So that puts us into connection to our point next time. So here is an example here, and as you can see, the word INF2 was apparently a keyword that the author believes people would be looking for. So INF2 was mentioned in the title, was mentioned in the highlight, and was mentioned in the abstract. But remember one thing, you don't want to overdo this so that your human reader gets bored while they are reading your paper. Other thing here is a caption for an image. It's very important to load the captions with the keywords that people would be looking for. And if you can add metadata to the figures that you are writing, that you are preparing, like right-click properties advanced, there is probably a section to add metadata for your Word file or your PDF or your image, do that. And with that, we reach the end of our session here today. And I'm sorry to have gone a bit overboard. For next time, we will be continuing where we left off at how to promote your research article once it has been published. At this point, let's check your questions. And see if there are any questions that we have received. How do highlights differ from keywords? Keywords are keywords like expressions or compound nouns. Highlights are complete sentences. So highlights, look again. Again, so let's look at the example of highlights. There is a keyword section here, and there is a highlight section. So the highlight section are in complete sentences telling me what's the most important and the exciting part about this paper. The author keywords are there. These are the labels that are there in the paper. Is it advisable to include a literature review section in a systematic review? So writing systematic reviews are usually their own, they have their own technicalities of how you write a systematic review paper. I don't want to delve into that a lot because we have a session planned for literature for systematic reviews. However, if you are conducting a systematic review, then there is a very important part where you mention what is the method that you are using to get your search results in the very first place. And then you start narrating those results. So yes, your literature, there is a part for literature review. Should you call it literature review section? Not necessarily. Okay, so this is like a bit of a brief answer for your question here. What is the average length of a journal title? What are the key parameters in the title? Again, the title, there is complete flexibility of how you write your article. Some journals, so if I look this journal here, for example, physics letter A, if the journal, when I'm looking at its guide for authors, if it doesn't mention anything about a maximum length for my title, then I'm free to write it however I like. But remember, you want to keep it succinct. You want to keep it focused on the core message. You don't want a clickbait. And you want something that makes it different, if you can. One thing that's very important, this journal here has this policy stated, what's called your paper, your way. Your paper, your way is a policy adopted by about 500 of Elsevier journals, which means that there are no formatting guidelines for a paper. For a manuscript, formatting guidelines are only applied if your paper has been accepted. If your paper has been accepted, then they tell you what kind of formatting they need. But when you are submitting, there are no guidelines. Write your paper the way you perceive is best. I believe this was answered. This was answered. Yeah. Do we have any further questions from any of our audience? I know that we're 6 minutes beyond the time, and my apologies for that.
Hi, Khaled. I've checked on Facebook as well. There aren't any questions on Facebook. So see another question in Q&A.
So yeah, one question popped up. Citing or referencing its own article will affect visibility or not? So let me say it this way, okay? The main reason why you should cite your own work is not about visibility. It shouldn't be about the visibility. Citing your work is something you do out of necessity. So you are building your work, you're building your paper, but there are previous work that you've done that is basic to understanding what you're currently doing. This is a case why you should cite your own work, okay? In terms of visibility, having more references improves visibility by improving links and search engine optimization, or so yeah, that could be useful. But this should not be where you are betting on visibility. The reference section should be, references should be listed based on merit, on their contribution and their importance to the topic being discussed. So I hope that answered the question. And remember, if you are abusing the self-citation part, your human readers will not like this. And they are very likely it will impact your prestige. If that's something that people pick up on, that you are abusing self-citations, you will lose prestige points, definitely.
Thank you so much, Khaled. Just on behalf of everyone on the line and myself, thank you very much for presenting today. As expected, this webinar was very impactful, covering important topics that affects all of the researchers in Africa. And it's simple tips to make a big impact. So we really do appreciate you taking the time to join us in this webinar series. And we look forward to your next webinar as well. Just for those on the line that may have not registered for the next webinar, I have put a link in the chat box. So I just want to share my screen quickly. The link will lead you to the Africa Researcher Success Portal. A lot of requests for the recording of the session. It will be under recorded webinars in the next couple of days. So if you didn't make it to attend any of the other sessions as well, you'll find the recordings here. And for the next session, which is the second part of today's topic, which is preparing my manuscript for visibility and how to increase the visibility of my published work. You can register for it under upcoming webinars. So please do utilize the site and share it with any colleagues or friends that you think may benefit from it. Once again, thank you to our really great presenter today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session. Bye, everyone.
Thanks to our